Picture this. You're facing a challenge in your business and you're trying to come up with a solution.
Yeah, we always want those solutions.
But there's a sneaky little mental roadblock.
No.
Yes. And standing in your way. And the funny thing is, it's something that works for us most of the time. But then,
Really?
But then it also gets in our way. So it's called,
Okay.
and I'll explain. Stick with us.
I hope so.
It's called functional fixedness or fixedness. So think about this. When
And sometimes I need all the help I
well,
can get.
I've got a pen here in my hand, right?
Right.
What's the purpose of this pen?
Right with.
Okay, 99% of the time, that's what it's for, right?
Right.
What if your back itches? Can you use it to scratch your back?
Sure.
Functional fixedness, how it works for us is we see a pen and we think right? We don't have to think any further. We think right and we use the pen to write. It's made for something and we use it for that.
Okay.
Okay?
I'll go with that. What else?
Well, so now we're getting into the part where this cognitive bias turns into kind of like, feels like confession time for me because I get caught in the bias part of it so much, right? And it's this thing of thinking that things can only be used for what they're designed for.
Yes.
Now, you're going to recognize, I knew as soon as I said it, you'd recognize it.
Yeah, there is a long family history of that.
So think of, the really thing that comes to mind for me so much is think of using a butter knife as a screwdriver, right?
Absolutely. One of my favorite things to do.
Okay. And
Or any kind of knife.
for many, it's really very situational. If you've got a Phillips head screw, it's got the little cross, you really want a cross point screwdriver. I mean, that's what's made for the job. But you could use the point of a sharp knife. Absolutely. Here's the problem. If you really have to put a lot of pressure on it,
torque on it,
now you're going to either bend or break the point off the knife,
or scratch the groove,
or cut yourself, or 100 other things. The tool that's made for the job is what's really most functionally effective. But if we didn't have that, we could do other things, right? There are other things to do. You can use, for a Phillips head, you can use a small straight blade screwdriver.
Absolutely.
It just fills 2 of the 4
depending on how big the groove is, you can use a dime. I've done that too.
Okay, now a dime I think of more in terms of a straight slot.
I've done it with both.
Really? Okay.
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay, so we just really went down the rabbit hole with that, but that's a really simple example of using things, of how we think about using things.
Yeah, I've never had the right tool to do the job 90% of the time.
And I would say that you are much less prone to this functional fixedness than I am.
I agree.
In that arena, in that particular arena of using objects. Okay? But there's 4 different areas that this can affect us. Oh yeah.
Ooh.
Oh yeah.
Now we're getting funky. Okay.
Okay.
What we got?
How about perceptual? Perceptional. That's a different word. New one for me. Perceptional. An example of that, how we perceive a situation. An example is a coffee shop owner wants to have more people in his store, increase the traffic.
Okay.
And because he's so focused on the coffee shop is a coffee shop. So therefore, if I'm going to have more people, I need to have more coffee drinks to offer. Right? I need to add more things to the menu. But what if he expanded his thinking a little bit and didn't just think about the menu and the kind of the design purpose of and thought about just the space? What if during his off hours, he did some things to really encourage it as a co-working space?
Oh, okay.
And really,
you could even have open mic at night. You could do all.
We've seen Starbucks. A lot of people go to Starbucks and work.
Right.
They can also go to McDonald's and work. There's free Wi-Fi there. But the point is, thinking about the space differently other than just a coffee shop. So that perception of the space.
Okay.
What about the emotional realm of how what fits and what doesn't?
Okay.
Okay, the emotional part of it, an example would be a company that is considering a rebranding, whether it's just logo and their letterhead and things like that, or it's actually redefining the direction of the company.
Okay.
Right? And so the emotional attachment to
we've had that too.
To the way things have been, to the past and the history of the company,
and it can only
be very much an impediment, a block, right?
Absolutely.
A block to making that change, even though the change could be very beneficial to the company. So that's
diversification.
It's a different, I mean, you can argue that these overlap, and sure, they do, because they're all about how we think. But
Right.
but that
Well,
emotional aspect
so
of it.
you running through all of them.
When you're
all the
doing
time.
the screwdriver, the butter knife is a screwdriver, you're not emotionally attached to your favorite screwdriver that you have to use, and you can't use the butter knife because that'd be cheating. Right? Cultural is another one. Okay, and get back to a restaurant. A restaurant that's defined themselves as having just one cuisine.
Oh yeah.
You know, adding elements of a different cuisine or items on the menu from a different cuisine could be perceived by that person as being untrue to the brand, to the concept, or whatever.
Right.
So that's cultural. Cultural would be also political correctness, other things. I just
Right.
Good examples were hard to come by.
True.
Okay, and then intellectual, and this is more about definition rather than purpose. So with the screwdriver is more about purpose. It's made for this, right? What about in a business setting? The person running the business decides that, or has this intellectual concept of what sales is, a definition of sales. Sales is telling people what they need to know about our product, and you need to get out there and tell people all about our product.
Because the more you tell people about our product, the more they're going to want it.
But that's that intellectual box. And that leads me to the next thing. So how do we overcome this? And when we have to think outside the box.
Oh yeah.
We just have to think outside the box. But how
Use
do we
that
do
butter
that?
knife.
That's a great phrase. It's become very trite. It's a saying, but what does it really mean?
Yeah.
Well, to think outside the box, the first thing we got to do is define the box. What is the box? What are the edges? Where's the limits? And then what's outside that?
Right.
So that in itself, it requires a stepping back, right? I mean, if you're another metaphor I love is in the movie. If you're in a movie theater and with that big screen, especially if you're in one of the front rows, closer rows to the screen, you can, for a bit, lose awareness of the fact that you're not in that movie, in that world of that movie, right?
True.
And so there was the phrase I learned was mind the edges. It was like perceptually stepping back and noticing the edges of the screen, and that there's something beyond that you're not actually in that world. So that's
regardless of what you think.
That's a way of getting outside the box.
Okay.
It's thinking outside the box. It's stepping back from whatever's familiar, whatever came to mind first. And again, most of the time that works for us. You know, we see a screw, we think screwdriver. Yes, most of the time that works. But when a problem we're trying to solve is, we need a new approach. We need something.
Absolutely.
When we realize that the way we've been doing things isn't working and we need something new, then is when we need to let go of the familiar and really just try to look at it like I've never done this before. Pretend that the tools or the things that I've done before don't exist. And what would I do if they didn't exist? How would I approach this? What else? How could I look at this with completely fresh eyes? One way of doing that was called the generic parts technique. And it was looking at something and breaking it down not only to its component parts, but then redefining those even more generally. Okay, and a great example was a candle. Okay, got a candle. I don't have one here, but candle. Okay, it's a thing, right?
Yeah.
You break it down. Well, it's.
Never mind. It's not coming.
We're going to have an avalanche if we take the candle loose. So a candle is, you got a wick with wax around it. So the component parts on the surface are wax, wick. Okay. Here's a problem. Wick.
Yeah.
The name implies a function. You have to use it in a certain way.
Okay.
If you didn't think of it as a wick, what else might you think of it as?
Lightning point.
How about string?
Oh, well, okay.
I mean,
we're talking about that.
It's more component. It's more generic. Calling it a wick, naming it a wick, gives it a particular function.
And a particular
and it
thing
locks
that
us.
you have to buy.
It puts us in that box.
You only can look at it.
A wick is something you light. It burns. It has a very function. And now we're thinking only about light.
Okay.
But we've got this thing. What if we just call it a string? Well, then it could be used to tie something. It could be, and breaking it even more further down than that. What if you looked at the string as a bunch of fibers that were woven together?
Okay. And then something that you could.
Now they could be separated.
True.
They could be. It could be that fiber could be turned into something else. You know.
True. You could knit with it. You could.
Right.
You
So
could,
that's this idea of breaking into component parts or the
yeah.
generic parts, and generic in terms of labeling as well as their physical separation. This cognitive bias was first defined in 1945, and
I was in before
I forgot the
my
name of the guy that did it, but it was, he did an experiment when he got a bunch of people together.
Okay.
Okay. And he gave them a box, or cardboard box of thumbtacks.
Okay.
He gave them a candle, and he gave them a book of matches. And the task he gave them was attach the candle to the wall using what he gave him. Attach the candle to the wall so that you could light it and not have the wax drip on the floor or down the wall.
And it was a box of tacks,
A cardboard box full of tacks,
a candle, and matches.
a candle, and matches. Mm-hmm.
And how did he do that, darling?
It's such a great illustration of the problem. The cognitive bias is that the people, and he tried it two different ways. When he gave them the box of tacks,
Yeah.
and I should have described it better that way, a box of tacks, they saw it as a box of tacks.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't see the box and the tacks separately. They saw the box simply as containing the tacks. When he gave them the box, an empty cardboard box and a pile of tacks,
Then they knew what
then
to
they
do.
very quickly took a tack, attached the box to the wall, and set the candle in it and lit it.
There you go.
Boom. Again, separating the component or the generic parts, the box separate from the tacks. Simple, brilliant, but this is how we lock ourselves into our thinking, and this is how we can look at this differently and look at our thinking differently when we need to solve a problem in our business.
And that's what we're here for.
And we look forward to seeing you in another video, and I'll see you soon.